Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, with the beginning of the hurricane season, there's always a possibility that storms might be heading our way. One event, though, that has turned in a different direction, leaving us with a depression, is the Super Bowl, which was again denied to the city that the NFL once favored. We'll look at these stories tonight, as well as new figures on police response, an investigation of a church, legal turmoil on death row, and the termites are back. And the light for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. David Hammer, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4. Mark Schleifstein, environmental reporter, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune. And James Gill, columnist, the New Orleans Advocate. We're going to go over to David first, and talking about police response times in Orleans Parish. We're talking about NOPD. You guys have been doing a series on that, you and your colleague Mike Pearlstein. What are you all finding since you first started reporting this a few months back? Huh?
In the fall, we did a series called NOPD Call Waiting, and really exposed the astronomical response times, both in terms of emergencies being in the kind of 20-minute range, and then all response times to 911 calls, lower grade calls included, being like an hour and a half. And there were a lot of things that the police did right away to address this. And I have to say, Chief Michael Harrison has been very responsive to us and has been very candid about his frustration. And what it really boils down to in the end is there aren't enough police officers to be able to do community policing, which is the recommended way of policing a city, and responding to calls when people call 911. And so there were a lot of problems, including false alarms and things like that, that were taking people off the streets for unnecessary reasons. But we were able to highlight a number of cases where people were in emergencies, their life was in danger, and the police just were not able to respond in time because of the backlogs and the problems. So they addressed a lot of things, and they came up with some new strategies, things like hot cars that respond quickly and then allow other units to come in to take reports later, but make sure that the situation is secured. Downgrading, code 2 is actually considered the higher priority emergency, downgrading those to code 1, non-emergencies, if it's not necessary, because there was criticism that NOPD was just throwing too many crimes into that pot of emergencies. And other strategies, staggered shift change, so that you didn't have big delays happening at shift change time. And what we've seen over the last 6 months since we did our original series is a really strong improvement that, going from 20 minutes to 16 minutes on the emergencies, going from 2 hours to an hour and a half on the non-emergencies. But they're still falling short of their goals in a lot of them. They want to have 90% at 7 minutes or less on emergencies, and they're only at 36% on that.
That's a long way to go. So,
Yes.
I mean, how do you address this problem? Like you said, we don't have enough officers on the force. So what are they doing?
Well, they're trying some more strategies. They're trying to do things more online reporting, things like that, to try to address these things. And, Chief Harrison expressed more frustration this time when he said that, we just need to be able, there was a bill in the legislature to allow cops to not have to deal with fender benders if there's not injury in an accident, and that was shot down. So there are certain things that they're doing that are just failing, and the big thing is they have to be able to add officers to the force. The process of bringing officers on is a long one, and they continue to have problems with attrition, so they're just treading water.
And so the security districts, you all did some recent reporting on that.
Right. I wanted to take a look at, security districts promote themselves. These are the taxing districts that individual neighborhoods, there's actually about 60 of them in the city, and people pay additional taxes to get additional security forces. Sometimes they're kind of the rent-a-cops that ride around in the pickup trucks, but in the bigger districts like Lakeview and Mid-City, it's actually police officers, overtime officers riding around in regular police units, and they respond very quickly, like 8 minutes on average, but they are responding to only certain types of calls.
And they're right there in the district.
And they're right there, and in Lakeview, for instance, they have 7 different zones, and they keep them to those zones, and it's very efficient. But the problem is that, if you have a certain type of crime or a certain type of issue that they may perceive as being a non-emergency, you have to wait on the regular NOPD, and we actually found that some of the response times are worse in those neighborhoods that are covered by the security districts when you have to rely on the regular NOPD.
Yeah, were most of the patrols single officers, or are they still working in pairs at all?
No, it's usually single officers. The times that when the training, the field training is going on, they have to be accompanied by another officer. But they are so low right now in staff. I mean, you can have situations where the entire 3rd District, which covers everywhere from the Metairie line all the way to Downman Road on the other side of the Industrial Canal, could be covered by 5 officers or something, or sometimes even less. It's really bad, and that has improved gradually, but it's going to take a while.
Also, the chief had said that he was going to redeploy 94 officers, but not all 94 have been redeployed.
Right, about 70 or 74 have so far, and this is a problem we've found in the past, which is he says, you know what, I'm taking you off desk duty, we need to get you on the street, we need to stop this hemorrhaging, and then some of those people say, actually, sayonara, I'm going to retire or whatever, I'm not going back on the street.
Choose not to do it. Well, we have recruits going through the classes and anticipate graduating more, but like you said, it's hard to keep up with attrition.
And there's consent decree, which requires certain steps, and that extends the time period of bringing new officers on.
Okay, David, thanks a lot. Over to Mark now, and it's just around the corner, hurricane season. We don't really want to say that, I hate to think of it, but normal season, so they say? What does that mean?
Well, what they're saying is near normal, and the numbers sort of speak to that. We're talking about 10 to 16 named storms, 4 to 8 hurricanes, and there could be 1 to 4 major hurricanes, category 3 or higher. And of course, the reality is that those numbers don't really mean anything. It depends on where you are on the coastline and whether or not a tropical storm or a hurricane comes in your direction. But now is the time, June 1st is the beginning of the season, now is the time for people to put together a plan for their families, and put together what they're going to take with them, make sure that their insurance is in order. Remember that you've got to have your insurance in place 30 days before a storm hits you, so now's the time to check all that stuff out.
Right.
One of the problems that we're seeing in New Orleans is what some in the business call hurricane amnesia. It now has been several years since we've had a major storm, and it's been 10, almost 11 years since Katrina. And we have a new generation of people who've grown up not knowing what hurricanes are. And
a lot of newcomers who haven't lived through it.
That's also true. So that's a real problem. One of the things that should help them out this year is the National Hurricane Center has finally got in place a new map for storm surge, which is our biggest risk here in the city, that will be put in place to show what the chances are of how high the water will be around the area. Now, for New Orleans, there's a problem with that, which is that New Orleans inside the levee system, that map's just going to show a checked area because they really can't identify how high the water will be inside the levee system by themselves. But the National Weather Service local office will be issuing reports basically at basically the same time that those maps are released to show what's going to happen inside the levee system.
Do you think that the levee system is really, really ready? It's 100% ready?
Well, let's remember the levee system is there. It's a so-called 100-year levee system. It's designed to protect us from a storm surge created by a hurricane with a 1% chance of occurring. That kind of a hurricane is not Katrina. Katrina, the way it hit St. Bernard Parish, was a 250-year storm. The way it hit the waterfront on the lake was a 150-year storm. Both that kind of a storm would put water over top of the levee system. But the reality is it would be less water than occurred before, because what happened last time was that large chunks of the levee system disappeared. And so water just continued to pour in. Now the levees have been built properly in ways that they're not going to disappear. And so the amount of time that flooding occurs will be reduced, and the amount of water inside the levee system, even for a 500-year storm, the Corps is suggesting maybe 4 or 5 feet at most.
And there are also important elements to the whole risk reduction system, including like the surge barrier.
That's true.
Gates, floodgates, et cetera.
The other thing to remember is that system is not there to protect your lives, it's there to protect your property. And the reality is that any time that we have a major system come in, it could be even, in some cases, a Category 1 hurricane, people may be requested or ordered to evacuate, and they should take those orders seriously. They should get out. This is not the place to stay when there's no power and nobody there to save you.
We know about that from reporting on hurricanes, even
that
more minor ones like Gustav and Ike, going through that, or Isaac.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah, there was one that was a hurricane. It was a Category 1, but it stayed. It didn't move.
That's also a problem, and the National Weather Service actually, not just in the New Orleans area, but across the nation, is rolling out this year a new water program. Where they're going to dramatically increase the amount of readings that they have about how high water is in rivers and streams inland, so that people have a much greater idea of the potential for flooding that they're facing, not just during hurricanes, but during the rest of the year as well, like we saw earlier this year on the North Shore.
So a lot of people are resistant to the idea because they've been asked to do it so many times of evacuating. I think people feel stronger and stronger about that.
Well, I don't know how to stress it more. They should get out, and if they don't, I will. I'll use the line that Kathleen Blanco did for Hurricane Rita, and that is, if you plan on not leaving when you are ordered to get out, write your Social Security number in indelible ink on your arm so that the public, so that when they come back in, people can identify your body.
That's pretty good warning. Yes, it is a reality. So with these, real quick, these surge maps, will they be able to more accurately predict what kind of water event we would be experiencing?
Well, there's 2 different things that are occurring. One is this map that says this is a worst case scenario based on the track that we're looking at over this wide area. This is how high the water could be. And then they're also, this year, they're starting to have a map that will be a watch and warning for storm surge 1 year in advance of an actual written watch and warning that will start being issued. But these watch and warning maps will be used basically in conjunction with evacuation decisions by local officials to show what areas are under a storm surge watch and what areas are under a storm surge warning, separately from a hurricane watch and hurricane warning, which are wind-based, and they can be in different areas.
Okay. All right, Mark. Thanks a lot. We'll keep our fingers crossed that that's all we have to discuss this season about it. Okay. Over to James right now. You had a piece about public defense for capital cases, death penalty cases, and there's been some change in the legislature regarding that.
Well, yes, it's the Public Defender Board at the state level spends like $10 million a year hiring non-profits to handle capital cases, and also funnels money to the local defender offices, who are all hard up. So this bill was designed to bail out the local defender offices and maybe spend less on these capital cases. I mean, there just isn't enough money to go around, is the problem. So what it highlights, in my opinion, is that it is absolutely insane to retain the death penalty. It costs a fortune, and we just don't use it. We never carry it out. I mean, the last execution in Louisiana was in 2010, and that was a volunteer. I mean, this guy borderline just declined to file any appeals. So, and meanwhile, we've got 80 people on death row who are all going to die of natural causes. And in fact, and the system is also highly inefficient. I mean, of 52 death penalties imposed by Louisiana courts since 2000, 50 were thrown out by the higher courts. 50 out of 52.
The death penalties.
Yeah, and in 7 of those cases, the defence were actually found to be wholly innocent of the crime. So it's inefficient.
So the ones that were thrown out, what was usually the reason?
It varied. I mean, some was prosecutorial misconduct, the old favourite. Some was judicial error. Some was that the guys just happened to be innocent, which is always a fly in the ointment. But a number of different reasons. But I mean, the point is, we have all this. We have this system imposing its death sentence, and it's so inefficient, they all get thrown out. Now we've got one right now before the United States Supreme Court. A death penalty. This is not a sympathetic defendant. This is a guy in Angola doing life for murder, was part of a gang that tried to escape, took a guard hostage and beat him to death. So anyway, he was tried and found guilty and sentenced to death. But of course, the prosecutors pulled their usual trick of sitting on evidence. So yet another one of these cases goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is an overall number in the past. So this guy, there's not a question of, the verdict is not at issue, the death sentences. So here's another guy on death row that will get off. So meanwhile, what does it cost? I mean, testimony this week in the legislature that said that it costs it would save $10 million a year just in indigent defence costs at the state level if we hadn't done the death penalty. Now, once you factor in also cost of prosecution, court costs, the extra costs of security and so on, and of maintaining people on death row, it costs millions and millions of dollars a year, which we don't have.
James, is there something more inefficient about Louisiana, though, particularly? Because I actually covered an execution in Arkansas, and they went through a whole long process of appeals and everything, and exhausted everything to the hilt. And they, of course, ended up executing several people while I was there, and they did a lot in Texas, obviously, yep. when Bush was governor.
Sure, yeah.
Why would it be so hard? Why is it so inefficient here?
Well, because we have stupid judges and we have unscrupulous prosecutors, and the cops arrest innocent, get made.
Yeah. I think the judiciary would take issue with that about the stupid judges.
Well,
the DA just decided today to drop a retrial case against somebody who had been exonerated.
Yeah. So, clearly this means that you talk about people being executed. Clearly, with all these errors, it is beyond question that we must have executed innocent people here in the past, and no doubt in Arkansas too.
Yeah.
Now, whether we are more incompetent than Arkansas, I couldn't say. I defer to your greater knowledge of Arkansas, of course.
Let me just get you back, though, to this bill that we're talking about real quickly to wrap this up. The bill will divert some of these dollars for capital cases from public defenders, not all of them.
The bill will reserve 65% of the state board's annual budget, which is $33 million. Will reserve 65% of that to be sent to the local indigent defender offices.
Who are crying for money right now. They really need it.
There are 42 in Louisiana and 22 are insolvent. So it's a genuine crisis.
So has this bill been signed? Has it moved through the legislature?
Passed both houses. It's going back to the House for concurrence on Tuesday. But it's a foregone conclusion. And of course, I'm the only one saying the death penalty that's not been an issue. But it seems to me this is just the latest evidence against it.
But right now we still do have the death penalty in effect in Louisiana.
It's on the books, law. We just never use it.
All right, James, thanks a lot. I'm going to go over to Errol now. We lost the Super Bowl.
We did.
For 2019?
Yeah. We lost it, but it seems like Roger Goodell even felt the need to send a letter to Tom Benson saying, "Look, we really, really like you." And it was a competition between New Orleans and Atlanta, and it went 4 votes. And I think you need a 3/4 votes the first 3 times, and then the last time it's a simple majority. And Atlanta won on a simple majority, so the fact that they were able to push it that far, what the NFL seems to be looking for is new stadiums. The NFL awarded 3 Super Bowls. They gave Atlanta 2019. For 2020, they gave what's called South Miami, which some people will remember. That's where the Saints won the Super Bowl. So that's a relatively new stadium. And then Los Angeles, the Rams are going back to Los Angeles, so they're getting a new stadium. So they tend to look for new things. And this year it's going to be in Minneapolis. And that was the Super Bowl that New Orleans lost too, because Minneapolis says, look, we're building a new stadium. No, New Orleans is not building a new stadium. Everybody is satisfied with what we have, and they're doing a lot of work to it. But there is this thing about awarding and using the Super Bowl as a promotion. You know, the very first Super Bowl, which was played in January of '67, the halftime show at the very first Super Bowl was a salute to New Orleans, because the new franchise, the Saints, were going to start that upcoming season, and the halftime performer was Al Hurt. And so there has been a promotional side to it. Atlanta, according to Goodell, put up a lot of money. It's very, he said it was a very unusual offer that they made. But I think everybody feels pretty certain that we're in line right after those next three. And New Orleans is by far everybody's favorite. There's no doubt about it.
Roger Goodell sent a letter to Tom Benson saying, great presentation, you know, and undoubtedly we will be back to New Orleans.
Because we're so compact, we're so good at tourism. Right. And imagine the experience, because those who went to the Super Bowl when the Saints were in South Florida talked about how spread out they were all over the place. They could go there, then go to Los Angeles, which is the ultimate in being spread out. So by then I think people could be anxious to come back to New Orleans.
Okay. We'll look to the future for our Super Bowl again. Thanks, Errol. David, over to you. You've been doing some reporting about a megachurch out in New Orleans East that has come under some review.
Yeah, well, I started investigating this a few months ago. It's called City Church of New Orleans, and the pastors are Owen and Tammy McManus. And it's a very large church, 4,000 families. It's a very popular church. But they started to do more with media, and they started making some movies. And the star of the movies called The Good Life, his name is Robert McGill, and he started posting on Facebook some concerns back in January, and people started coming out of the woodwork. So I started looking into it. And what I found was a lot of people from different parts of the church who were not connected saying that they had seen different things with the way the movies were put together. I was able to get documents that showed some questionable things about how they were charging and how they were paying people in their employ. And then they went to the state for film tax credits, and there appeared to be some things on those application records showing payments that for salaries that the people claimed they didn't get. There was some. They also have an attached school called the Bishop McManus Academy, where some anonymous teachers complained that they were being told to fabricate classes in order to get federal grant money. So all of this went into a police report, actually, just this past week, and the police said in the police report that they are likely to arrest the pastors, Owen and Tammy McManus, as well as two of the top people at the school, Bishop McManus Academy, and now we just have to wait to see if they follow through on that.
Now, of course, the McManuses say this is just not true. None of it is true. Not the case.
Right. They gave me a statement on my original stories last month, and then their attorney, Pat Fanning, gave me an interview for the story this week, and says that this is sour grapes, that this is people who are disgruntled former employees, former members who feel that they didn't get what they wanted out of the experience, and that's why they're saying it. But I've got all of these informants have spoken to me, and one of them is actually incarcerated and says that he has no connection to any of this stuff, but he was told by Owen McManus that he was going to try to defraud the film tax credit program, which is state tax dollars.
So arrest anticipated.
The police to announce ahead that they may be arresting someone in the future?
That is unusual. Yes, I can't say that I've ever seen that before.
And so they're, as I said, arrests are anticipated in this.
Yeah, they're saying that in the report. So now we just wait for them to execute it.
All right, David. Thanks a lot. We're going over to Mark now. To wrap up the show, we're going to talk about our favorite little pesky friends, termites.
Oh, termites, yes, we've got them. They're still here. They haven't gone away. They're an invasive species. They were brought in after World War II, at the end of World War II, Formosan termites, misnamed. They're actually from South China. And they are still very active in the New Orleans area, as we've seen at least twice this year with major swarms. The swarming insects that people see once a year are just the reproductive form of the insect. They're not the ones doing the worst work. They're not the ones who are eating your house and home. And those are the ones that are continuing to operate year-round. One of the bigger problems that we have is that, especially in the French Quarter program has ended. That was a federally financed program to basically treat every building in the French Quarter. So that's over, and there's some indications that maybe as much as a third of the facilities in the French Quarter may not be getting contracts for
termite treatment and protection.
treating.
Yeah.
So people are looking to see whether or not there's going to be an increase in the number of termites. The city is looking at, got sticky traps up all over the place where they're trying to actually do a count of how many.
Errol has a quick question.
I remember one time a foremost termite expert told me that when they come out, relax, by 9 o'clock they're going to all disappear. Twice I've been out this summer when they've come, and I've told people, look, wait, 9 o'clock they're going to be gone. They said, Errol, you're crazy, 9 o'clock they were gone.
Yeah. Well, they are gone, but the reason they're gone is because they only have a certain amount of time that they can be outside before their wings fall off. And that period is the time in which they are supposed to be finding a mate and then finding some place to go build a new nest. So they're still there, some of them, a tiny amount. It only takes one male and one female to create a nest, and we have thousands of them that are coming out every year.
And that's several years before you know that they're residing in your walls.
Absolutely. It takes 4 or 5 years before they are able to grow the colony to the point where they're reproducing enough to have their own flying insects coming out.
And it's still swarming time, even though we really haven't seen that much.
The Formosan termites will swarm all the way up to the beginning of July.
Okay, well, we don't really like seeing them. I just hope they stay away. Okay, them too. Errol, time to look ahead.
Okay, well, it can truly be said that Jefferson Parish is keeping up with the time. This is a monument that went up on Veterans Highway right by the 17th Street Canal this week, and it's impressive looking. It's kind of hard to see the time, but it's good. And I think it's just another part of the whole. Well, it's truly been a beautification project along Veterans Boulevard. It looks a lot better than it does, but it's a good-looking clock and it's there.
And very nice artwork too, up and down the boulevard. David.
Well, in honor of being with Mark Schleifstein, who taught me everything I know about environmental reporting, I was honored that this week there was a report released by the National Academies that used some testimony from me to talk about the offshore safety situation, and I'm going to be looking into some coastal erosion issues coming up soon.
A very important issue, Mark.
Tomorrow we're going to see something rather unusual. The Archbishop of New Orleans will be officiating at a funeral for Errol Keating, who died 72 years ago and was buried in a hastily dug grave with his friend John Klopp, also from New Orleans. They were Army privates, and they were fighting the Japanese in Papua New Guinea.
Okay, so they've come home.
Come home.
James.
Well, as the legislature gets close to the end of the session, the governor and the legislature are still at loggerheads, principally, of course, over the budget. We'll see how it seems very interesting to me. Ever since I've been here, everyone's been saying the governor is all-powerful, legislators do what they're told because they're terrified of the governor, and he has too much power. Guess what? Since Edwards got elected, no one listens, no one pays any attention at all to what he says.
Okay, so it is a fight up there. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.